Welcome to another edition of Radio Influencers, a podcast series we're doing for Radio Update. I'm your host, Andy Meadows. On today's episode, we're going to ask this question of the broader radio industry and individual stations. What's your game changer? But first, let's look at the results from our recent Radio Update polls. In last week's Weekly Wire poll, we played off Tracy Johnson's Hot Topics Without Hot Water, How to Handle Controversy on Air Without Getting Canceled article, and asked this question: how do your on-air talent handle controversial topics? Roughly two-thirds said they avoid them entirely, while roughly just a third said they approach them with caution. So, to those two-thirds, I'd suggest reading Tracy's article to hear his argument for why radio should not avoid those topics, especially when they're the big story of the day that everyone's talking about, something I vehemently agree with and have written about myself. We're recording this on Saturday, shortly after the Weekend Wire went out, but we've already had a decent response to this poll question: how creative is your commercial production? The options were very creative, somewhat creative, and not creative at all. Over half, 52.9%, said their commercial production is very creative. 29.4% said somewhat creative, and only 17.6% said not creative at all. That question was inspired by Stephanie Blue's Creative Needs to Be Creative article about the value of creative production that quoted a recent Nielsen study backing that up. As always, this podcast is recorded using Riverside. I'll put my affiliate link in the show notes, or you can get it by going to radiostationconsultant.com. If you use my affiliate link, I'll give you a free 30-minute remote session to give you some tips and tricks on how to use Riverside. Now let's get into today's episode. If you have any thoughts or questions after watching or listening, email them to me at andy@radiostationconsultant.com or editor@radioupdate.com, and I'll answer them to the best of my ability. Throughout my career, one thing I've heard pretty consistently is that I think too big. That's a great idea, Andy, but we need to dial it back a little and think smaller. It's something I've heard quite a few times. Obviously, there were times that the people pushing back on one of my ideas were right, and I had gotten out over my skis a bit, outkicked my punt coverage or whatever other sports metaphor suits your fancy. In those cases, because I'm a believer in the long game, I always hold on to the ideas, because what may not work today or at a specific station format market may work down the road or in another situation. But often I wasn't thinking too big, and when I did get the occasional big idea through and approved by whomever needed to approve it, we saw massive results. Going all in on a niche format in a crowded market that had no obvious holes, convincing a radio group who hadn't done any major promotions in years to start giving away $10,000 locally every book, doing 60-second stop sets when everyone else in the market is doing 4-minute plus stop sets. Those big things worked because they were big swings. Game changers aren't small, safe things that are guaranteed to work because everyone else is doing something similar, so it's a concept that's been proven over and over again. Don't get me wrong, there's a time and place for doing things we know are going to work, like playing the hits, putting proven on-air talent on the air, and doing a contest that works every time we've done it. But there are also times that call for us to take a little risk and try something big. Right now, though, I'm not seeing a lot of radio groups that are willing to think big for understandable reasons. The volatile economy, working in a shrinking industry, both of which contribute to everyone being understaffed. However, those are the very reasons why we need to implement some game-changing ideas at individual stations, individual groups, and as an industry at large. We all know where this downsizing eventually leads. If we all continue doing business as usual, every year there will be less and less people doing radio, and eventually it'll just be a very small handful of self-sufficient, versatile people with a passion for radio that are doing it for the love and not the money and barely eking out a living. But it doesn't have to be that way. So I pose this question to everyone watching or listening. What's your game changer? For some, it may be getting more into video by putting cameras in all the studios, talent's home studios, and every remote bag. For others that haven't already, it may be fully embracing AI tools to make your small staff even more productive than your prior large staff was. For some, it may be doing that format you've always thought about doing but never pulled the trigger on because you aren't 100% sure it'll work. For others, it's going back and doing that big promotion you did early in your career that you still tell stories about, but pairing that with modern tools to make it even bigger and more effective this time. For some, it may be turning your favorite on-air benchmark into a long-form audio-video podcast. For others, it could be creating a self-serve ad portal where advertisers can buy radios similar to how they've been buying digital advertising for years now. For some, it could be fully committing to YouTube and posting content consistently across all social media platforms multiple times a day. For others, it's finding and partnering with local influencers within your markets. For some, it's adopting a data-driven approach to adding and moving music instead of just following media base. For others, it's creating a subscription model for one of your stations or shows that has a passionate audience it could be monetizing for a small monthly fee. For some, it's engaging significantly more with their listeners on the phone, online, on social, and on site. For others, it's redesigning their outdated studios to maximize content creation. But what do you think? What could be your game changer, or what are some of the game-changing radio moments you've witnessed or been a part of over the years? Email me at andy@radiostationconsultant.com or editor@radioupdate.com and let me know. As always, if you have some thoughts you'd like to share on this or any other hot radio topic, submit an article about it by emailing submissions@radioupdate.com. Thanks for listening, watching, and reading. We'll be back next week with a new episode of Radio Influencers. Radio Influencers is a Radio Update production. New episodes are released on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Eastern.